What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name's CJ. This is Out of Bounds DFS, and in today's video, we're going to be doing a late look at the PrizePicks NBA board for March 3rd. It's almost 3 p.m. here on the East Coast, so much later than I typically do these videos, but I had some things come up, and when things come up, you must take care of them. So here we are, a little late, but better late than never is what I say. So if this is your first time on the channel, welcome to Out of Bounds DFS. On this channel, we talk all things daily fantasy sports, including or mostly relating to single player DFS. So PrizePicks, Monkey Knife Fight, and we'll get into some of the other sites as they continue to grow with us. So let's get right into it because we got a lot of games to talk about and not much time. So we'll start with the injury news real quick. Jeremy Grant, Pistons, questionable. Tobias Harris, 76ers, questionable. Kevin Durant, Brooklyn Nets, out. Gordon Hayward, Charlotte Hornets, probable. Anthony Davis, Los Angeles Lakers, out. Pascal Siakam, Toronto Raptors, out. Fred VanVleet, Toronto Raptors, out. Buddy Hield, Sacramento Kings, questionable. Luka Doncic, Dallas Mavericks, doubtful. Clint Capella, Atlanta Hawks, questionable. Domantas Sabonis, Indiana Pacers, questionable. Kelly Oubre, Golden State Warriors, questionable. Daniel House, Houston Rockets, questionable. Cody Zeller, Charlotte Hornets, questionable. Evan Fournier, Orlando Magic, my team, questionable. Malik Beasley is out for the Minnesota Timberwolves. OG Anunoby, Toronto Raptors, out. Tyrese Halliburton, Sacramento Kings, out. Marc Gasol, Los Angeles Lakers, doubtful. And Kyle Kuzma, Los Angeles Lakers, questionable. I'm not going to go over the rest because this is a long list as it is, but man, there are some impactful injuries to look out for tonight. Now, as usual, with the injuries and the projections and things like that, guys, just keep in mind that the stuff I'm going to talk about in today's video is subject to change. I mean, it's 3 o'clock now. Probably you'll get the video posted up by 4, so figure in the next few hours after this video goes up, there's a lot that could potentially happen here with all of this injury news. So without further ado, let's just start breaking down some projections real quick. Again, I don't want to make this video all too long because it's already getting dropped late in the day. So we're going to try and zip through things as quickly as possible. So let's start with this first game here. The Indiana Pacers taking on the Cleveland Cavaliers. Cleveland 106, Indiana 111. Totals aren't very high. Spread, I'd probably put it in a yellow. I think Indiana's the much more talented team here and probably shouldn't have any issue getting ahead of this Cleveland Cavaliers squad and potentially blowing them out. So I give it a yellow, can't give it a green in this situation. So let's talk some projections real quick. Malcolm Brogdon's one guy that stands out here as a potential over because of the DVA working in his favor here. He's projected for 39 on PrizePicks, just 36 over on RotoGrinders. So that's a under of 3 points. But when you factor in that the Cleveland Cavaliers cannot guard combo guards this season. They're allowing over 53 fantasy points per game to combo guards. And the fact that he's getting a pretty good fantasy points per minute average of 1.09 and a usage rating of over 26, well, this might be a spot where Malcolm Brogdon could potentially go over. Let's look at his recent game logs real quick and see how often he's been able to hit over 39 or under 39. All right, so as you can see in his last 5 games here, he's went over twice, under 3 times, and his last 3 haven't been particularly close to this 39 projection up on the board today. So I know Brogdon's been dealing with a little nagging injury, so he's a guy that, although the numbers seem to be in his favor, I can understand why you might want to go against the grain here and agree with RotoGrinders and take the under on Malcolm Brogdon. Now, looking down the list here, we've got Darius Garland and Colin Sexton. Both guys are considered to be combo guards based on RotoGrinders and their DVA system, defense versus archetype system. So both guys in very plus spots here in terms of DVA. Colin Sexton projected for 35. They got him at 36.03. And then we've got Darius Garland, who's projected at 30, and he is at 30.7 here over on RotoGrinders. So they seem to kind of be in line here on Darius Garland. On Colin Sexton, they like the over. Let's just look at Sexton real quick, as he's the guy who gets more fantasy points per minute and has the higher usage rating, so he's got the better chance of going over. Now you can see in his last 5 games, he has been playing very good basketball. This projection of 35, he's went under in 3, and over in 2. So his last 2 games much better than the previous 3, 43.5 and a 54.6. Playing much better basketball. Huge minutes too. Back-to-back games with 40 or more minutes for Colin Sexton. So this is looking like a spot here where he could potentially go over his fantasy projection of 35. Moving down the line here, Jared Allen in a pretty good spot. He's back down to 40 fantasy points. His projection on Roto Grinders today is 39.95, so they're pretty much right on the mark at 40 fantasy points. Both sides agree that 40 is probably the place to be on Jared Allen. One thing working in his favor is the fact that this Indiana Pacers team ranks number 1 in terms of most giving to fantasy or to post up bigs in terms of fantasy points per game. So they're allowing over 36 fantasy points per game to post up bigs like Jared Allen. So that's a good spot there. Although if you take the numbers out of the equation, Miles Turner, the guy that he'll be matching up against, could be a potentially tough matchup for him. Domantas Sabonis is not in an plus spot here. He's also questionable tonight. So if he's dealing with any kind of injury and ends up playing, I probably would lean toward taking the under on Sabonis. He's at 46 on PrizePicks, 43.91 over on Roto Grinders. So they like the under on him. Yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up for this one. I want to kind of make this video as short and sweet as possible, so it's not going to have quite as much in-depth analysis as we normally do, but hopefully we can get it out to you in time here for you to make some solid decisions on PrizePicks. So Utah Jazz, Philadelphia 76ers, the next game up on the board. Now the totals in this game are looking fantastic. These two teams are going to combine for about 229 to 230 points. So love to see that in terms of fantasy upside and fantasy potential. Also very good for single stat. So if you play single stat points, rebounds, assists, well, this could be a good place for you to look. Another thing working in this game's favor is the spread here. It's just 3.5 points, Utah being the favorite. So you got to pay attention to the injury news here. This is something that I had mentioned earlier. There's some guys here for Philly, namely Tobias Harris, who may not play in tonight's game, and that would be a huge bump to both Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. But it also could mean that they don't have as much talent and can't keep up with this Utah Jazz team, who's having a fantastic season. Anyway, Donovan Mitchell looks like he's in a pretty good spot tonight. He's projected for 40. They got him at 40.27 over on Roto Grinders. The DVA is very much in his favor. Philadelphia allowing 54 fantasy points per game to combo guards like Mitchell. So this is definitely a plus situation for Mitchell. When you take into consideration the totals and the spread, I think this is a good time for us to try and go over on Donovan Mitchell. Let's just see how his game logs have looked though. All right, so based on tonight's projection of 40, you can see in his last five games, he's went over 40 3 times, under 40 in 2 of them. And even in the games where he's went under, he hasn't went under by a ton, topping 36.8 and 35.8. So I think there's a chance here for Donovan Mitchell to A, play big minutes, and B, put up an over on this 40 fantasy point projection. Continuing on down the line here, Rudy Gobert, he is projected at 38 tonight on PrizePicks. He's at 40.8 on Roto Grinders. So they like him to go over by almost 3 points. So that's a pretty sizable over. He is a post-up big. Philadelphia allowing 30.42 fantasy points per game to post up big. So you imagine Gobert and Joel Embiid will probably be going at it tonight. I expect those two to give it their all and be highly competitive. Let's just look at Gobert's recent games and get an idea for how he's been playing lately. So in his last 5, guys, it's looking very good for Rudy Gobert in terms of taking the over, because he's went over in 4 out of 5. His worst game out of the bunch, 28.8. Not a very good game whatsoever, but the other 4 are looking pretty strong here in terms of going over 38, and especially his last 2, 41.7 and a 52.3 performance. So Gobert playing good basketball. I like the over. I kind of agree with Roto Grinders on that one. Drilling down here even further. Anything else really standing out? Not necessarily. They got Mike Conley at 31. He's at 28.9 over on Roto Grinders. So if we call that 29, I think this is a situation where he can go under here. He is a distributor type of point guard. In other words, pass first type of guy. Not going to take a whole lot of shots, not going to score a whole lot of real life points. But the DVA is not looking favorable for him. Just 16.01. So this is a negative matchup or negative DVA situation for him. But I think that's going to do it for that game. We can go ahead and move on to the next one. Like I said, trying to keep this thing as light as possible for you so we can get it out there and get some lineups locked in. So the next game we've got is the Detroit Pistons versus the Toronto Raptors. Toronto 108.5, Detroit 102.5. So right off the jump here, totals aren't very sexy. They're not very high. You wish that there was a little bit more points up on the board here in a game like this, but unfortunately, Toronto, they're going to be without Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet, so you can expect a big bump to the other guys, whether it be Kyle Lowry, Norman Powell, Chris Boucher, I believe is how you pronounce his name. So those guys should step up in the absence of two big pieces here for Toronto in Siakam and VanVleet. So going down the line here, we're just going to take a quick glance. Looks like Kyle Lowry is projected at 42. They've got him at 42 on Roto Grinders. This is a plus DVA situation for him, but just based on the projections, guys, this is going to be a situation where I probably fade. I'm not seeing much of an edge, much of an advantage for us in playing Kyle Lowry over or under in this case. Let's see who else is out there. We got Saddiq Bey at 24 on PrizePicks. He is at 24.32 on Roto Grinders. Now, versatile forwards against this Raptors team, they've done pretty well, 37.89 fantasy points per game. Now you factor in that Pascal Siakam won't be out there guarding these versatile forwards like Saddiq Bey, and this becomes an even better situation potentially for Bey to go over his projection of 24. So slight over on Roto Grinders. I think I kind of agree there with that and say that there is some upside, some potential here for Saddiq Bey. Jeremy Grant, he's a guy who's questionable tonight. Wouldn't call this a plus or positive DVA situation for him, but they like the under on Jeremy Grant, who's projected at 38. Let's just take a look at his recent game logs and get a good read on Jeremy Grant. All right, so we go back here against Memphis. 27.9 puts him well under. 34 puts him under. 35.4 puts him under, 37.9 puts him under, and 29.6 puts him under 38 fantasy points. So 5 straight games, guys, 5 straight where he has failed to reach 38 or more fantasy points. So it's been tough sledding for Jeremy Grant lately, and the projections sort of reflect that. And he's projected at 35.62 tonight for a reason. Add in the fact that Detroit's expected to only score 102.5 points as a team. And yeah, this is probably a situation where you're either going to fade it, meaning don't take anybody from this game, or you're just going to take the under on Jeremy Grant, especially with that questionable injury designation. Worst case scenario, maybe he gets ruled out and you end up with a DNP in your lineup. But I would take the under on Jeremy Grant based on what I'm seeing so far. Moving on down the line here. We've got Boucher, who's at 36 on PrizePicks, 35 on Roto Grinders. Not a plus situation for him. Just overall, I don't think that there's going to be a lot of guys that I'm going to target from this game in terms of taking the over on, especially with the totals being what they are. And it looks like PrizePicks has a lot of these dudes appropriately projected. So I don't see much of an edge with taking the over on anybody. If anything, I'm leaning toward taking unders in this situation. Mason Plumlee might be a good way to go. He might be a good under. He's at 31 on PrizePicks, 29.73 on RG. Let's look at his recent game logs and see what he's been up to. So if we go back to his 5th game here, 27.9, that puts him under. He's got an over here of 34.4. Then he raises his game to a whole nother level with an outburst of 51.3. And then back-to-back games where he comes crashing back down to earth, 26.8 and 15.5. So overall, guys, in his 5 games, it looks like he's went under a total of 3 times and over 2 times. So he could be a guy that I think in this situation you could target the under on, as his last couple have not been very good. And Roto Grinders tends to agree here. It looks like they have him projected for an under here at 29.73. So That's going to do it for this game. Like I said, not anything super, super exciting in terms of taking any overs on any of these guys. I don't think that there's a ton of upside to have here. So probably not a game that I'm going to target a whole lot unless I just want to take some unders on some of these scrub guys, some of these second-hand guys, these third-hand guys, whatever you want to call them. But anyway, the next game on the board, we've got the Houston Rockets taking on the Brooklyn Nets. It's the return of James Harden versus his former team, the Houston Rockets. How could you have missed that headline? Should be pretty intriguing to see James Harden go against his former team and the likes of John Wall, Victor Oladipo as they square off with Harden and Kyrie Irving. So let's enable this game here on RotoGrinders and look at the totals. It looks like Brooklyn is going to be a pretty big favorite here, 119.5 versus Houston, 109.5. So talking about a 10-point spread here. This one's definitely in the red zone for me. It looks like it's going to be a blowout. It doesn't look as though Houston will have much of a fighting chance. And if you've been keeping up with the Houston Rockets this season, you can definitely know why this game is projected for what it is. They're just not very good, and they're hurt. They're hurt, so they got that working against them too. Now, the first two guys that catch my eye here are both Kyrie Irving and James Harden. Both guys meet the classification of combo guards, and combo guards versus the Houston Rockets have feasted. Over 56 fantasy points per game to combo guards. That makes them the third most giving, third most generous team to combo guards in the entire league. So you can bet your bottom dollar that one of Kyrie Irving or James Harden are going to go off tonight. So let's look at James Harden. He's at 58. They've got him appropriately projected once again on PrizePicks. As RotoGrinders agrees, 58 is the ideal projection for James Harden. The other guy, Kyrie Irving, projected at 48. They got him at 46.86. So they like a slight under on Kyrie Irving in this game. So something to keep an eye on. Taking the unders here on these superstars, never a comfortable feeling. Like, you know, James Harden, Kyrie Irving, doesn't ever make you feel good to take an under on guys with high usage, high fantasy point per minute averages. So, you know, I can understand possibly just fading this situation, as a blowout would mean Kyrie, Harden may not play big minutes in the fourth quarter. So first half only for me? Yeah, definitely. You could definitely go that route on either one of these guys. Moving down the line here, we got Victor Oladipo and John Wall, two other guards from the other side of this game, of course, for the Houston Rockets. Both guys classified as combo guards as well, just like James Harden, Kyrie Irving. Now, both guys also in plus DVA situations from the looks of it. John Wall at 38. His projection on RotoGrinders is 37.07, so they like a slight under. And Victor Oladipo, he's at 37. Well, they like the slight over on Oladipo. Let's talk Oladipo real quick, because he's been a guy that's been a hard guy to read, a hard guy to figure out. And I think in the last game, most of us took the under on Victor Oladipo, and it ended up working. So let's see if we can maybe do that again. All right, so we dial it back to his fifth game in the game log. 40.4 would put him over 37. Pretty impressive. He misses a game, comes back, puts up just 15.8 points in 20 minutes of gameplay. Then he misses 4 straight games, comes back, puts up 36.7. Respectable for Victor Oladipo, but not good enough to go over. So that would be an under on him as well. His next game, 45 fantasy points, a huge over there versus tonight's projection of 37. He goes on to miss the next game here, and then ends up playing in his last game versus Cleveland. Plays for over 41 minutes, so plenty of minutes. Just doesn't do much with it, shooting the ball just 38%, and winds up with 34.1 fantasy points. So in his last 5 games, it's been a pretty ugly looking game log in terms of time missed and the inconsistencies of over or under based on tonight's projection. But you can see that he's went over in 2 games and under in 3. So the under has looked like the play on Victor Oladipo recently. Moving down the line here, anybody else jumping off? DeAndre Jordan is an interesting pick for an over. I think in this situation, with his projection being 26 on PrizePicks, he's at 29.88, almost at 30. So that's looking pretty good in terms of an over. But as we mentioned before, the Houston Rockets are really undersized. They're not a team that has a good, strong, dominant inside presence. So I would probably say that going over on DeAndre Jordan is probably the way to go here, as this could be a game where he racks up a ton of rebounds. I'd imagine this is a guard-heavy type of game, so a lot of James Harden and Kyrie for Brooklyn, a lot of John Wall, Victor Oladipo for Houston. So this could be a game where DeAndre Jordan just comes in and dominates. Anybody else standing out? Doesn't really look like it. So, yeah, I mean, Eric Gordon, he's at 26 on PrizePicks. He's questionable tonight. He's at 27 over on RotoGrinders. Not a plus DVA situation. Just off the top of my head here, I would probably go under on Eric Gordon. But, yeah, not a whole lot standing out to me. So I think we can go ahead and move on. We got Charlotte. The Charlotte Hornets versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. Let's see who we have on the board for that game. We got Karl Anthony Towns. We've got LaMelo Ball. We've got Terry Rozier, Anthony Edwards, and Malik Monk and Ricky Rubio. So let's talk about that game because the totals are looking quite nice. These two teams are combining for 233 points tonight, according to Vegas odds makers. You're talking about a spread of just 3 points, so that gets a green light for me in terms of spread. Looks like there's going to be plenty of points going up on both sides, so when those combined points are like 230 or more, well, that's kind of attention grabbing. That's kind of eye-opening. That's a game that I like to target because when there's more real-life points on the board, that means more shots are going up, which means more opportunities for points to go in, more opportunities for rebounds when those shots don't fall, more opportunities for assists if those shots are falling. So everything tends to go up when the game totals are high. Now, guys in this game that really stand out to me, looks like Malik Monk. Is he on the board today? He is. He's projected at 24 on PrizePicks. He's an interesting play, as is Terry Rozier, who's projected at 34. Now, they like the under on Malik Monk, according to RotoGrinders, and a slight over on Terry Rozier. Combo guards, though, versus Minnesota. The reason I'm mentioning both of these guys is that Minnesota allows over 51 fantasy points per game to combo guards. And heck, in my opinion, you could even lump LaMelo Ball into the combo guard category as well. I know they have him listed as a distributor type of point guard, which means he's like a pass first facilitator type, but I think he falls more into the combo guard category for me. So I'm going to lump him in with these other guys and just say that in general, guards of all kind should be able to do pretty well here against this Minnesota T-Wolves team. So I like these situations to take the over on guys like maybe like a Terry Rozier at 34. They got him at 34.57. Malik Monk, not quite as involved in terms of fantasy points per minute usage rating. So, yeah, I'd be a little more gun shy on taking an over on Malik Monk, even though, he can score. So maybe just taking Malik Monk over on his real life points instead of fantasy points. Maybe that's a way you can go on this game. Moving down the line here. Charlotte's typically not great against big guys. So Karl Anthony Towns at 51 PrizePicks points versus 48.15 over on RotoGrinders. They like the under on Towns. Let's just see how often he's been hitting this 51, the over on 51, I should say. All right, so his last 5 games, you could see 60. That would be well over 51. 52.1 would be an over. And he's got 3 games in a row, 2 of those games in which he's put up pretty strong totals in terms of fantasy points, but failed to go over in his last 3 games. So, yeah, I mean, it's been kind of hard to figure out Karl Anthony Towns. He hasn't been a guy who has been super consistent in his last 5 games, but I do like this matchup on paper here for him. I really don't have anybody in mind that I'm thinking is like going to be the Karl Anthony Towns stopper in this situation. And the fact that Minnesota is so shorthanded, no D'Angelo Russell, no Malik Beasley, I mean, somebody's going to have to step up, and it's going to be Karl Anthony Towns. He's their best player by far anyway. So anybody else jumping off the page? Anthony Edwards has been kind of interesting lately, playing a lot more minutes and being able to showcase his abilities. But you look at the DVA for Anthony Edwards all the way down here, they've got him at 23.78. So this would be like a negative DVA situation for him. Not a super interesting spot in terms of taking the over, but could be a way to go if you want to go under on Anthony Edwards. Otherwise, yeah, not a whole lot standing out to me here, guys, to be truthful. I do love the totals, though, in general, and I think the spread is very, very nice. I give that a green as well. Let's move ahead to the next game, which features the Atlanta Hawks taking on their division rival Orlando Magic. Hawks, of course, they've got a new coach, Nate McMillan, and they're going to try and probably embarrass the Orlando Magic. And why wouldn't they, right? The Magic haven't been playing that great of basketball lately. Now, surprisingly, this spread on this game is not very big. It's actually a pretty competitive looking spread. Orlando 108, Atlanta 111. Talking about a 3-point spread here. So the game, according to Vegas odds makers, may stay close and competitive. And there's a good reason for that. We talked about it at the top of the show. Clint Capella, questionable to play tonight. If he sits out, well then, my oh my. How does Nikola Vucevic not have himself a heck of a game? Going to be hard to stop him without your best inside presence in Clint Capella. So enough about that. Let's see what's looking good here. And the first guy that's jumping off the page to me is going to be Trae Young. This is a plus DVA situation. I'll speak from experience here. Guards against the Orlando Magic have feasted. We just can't seem to stop the better guards in the NBA, whether it be James Harden, whether it be Steph Curry, you name it, we just can't slow him down. So I do like this spot here for Trae Young, although his games recently have been pretty disappointing. So let's look at him real quick. In his last 5, he's went over in 2, under and way under, I should say, in 3. So 3 unders to 2 overs in his last 5. No recent games against this Magic squad. Combo guards, as I mentioned, plus DVA situation for sure for Trae Young. Projected at 45. The DVA for him, 52.56, meaning that there's some room for a ceiling. There's wiggle room for him to go up and over 45 fantasy points. Only thing really kind of scaring me, back-to-back situation, 3 games in 4 nights, and the game totals aren't all that juicy. So there's not a ton of points expected to be scored from really either side of this game. Looking through here, anything else standing out? Be careful with Clint Capella. Just be ready to make some moves as news breaks. So if he gets ruled out, well then I would expect a bump to John Collins, bump to Trae Young, and if they put anybody else in his place on this PrizePicks board tonight, probably a pretty big bump to them. Maybe like a Kevin Huerter. Is that how you say his name? That might be a guy who steps into more playing time and minutes. What else here? We got Terrence Ross up on the board. Evan Fournier. Yeah, I mean, both of those guys shooting wings in a very negative DVA situation here. Both guys, they could potentially, I guess, go under here. Fournier's at 32 on PrizePicks, 32.36 on RotoGrinders. So they like a slight over, but I'm not really buying into that. Terrence Ross is another guy. He's at 28 over on PrizePicks, 29.28 over on RotoGrinders. So despite the negative DVA, they like him to go over by a point or more, according to RotoGrinders. So that's going to do it for this game. Not a whole lot super interesting to me. I mean, it's going to be one of the lower scoring games. Yes, the spread is competitive at just 3 points. So, I mean, that could be a way to go if you're looking to be a little different, I guess. But let's see who's next on the board here. We've got the Chicago Bulls facing off against the New Orleans Pelicans. And guys, this one has one of the highest totals on the board tonight. So super interesting in terms of fantasy upside here for fantasy points, whether you go real life points, rebounds, assists. I mean, this is a game that looks like it could be a very giving situation for a lot of these guys. So let's enable both teams and start taking a look at some stuff that might stand out to us. All right, so right off the bat here, we got Kobe White. His projection is on the rise, guys. He has been at like 28, 27 for a lot of the games in recent memory. Well, tonight they've got him at 30, so they've jacked his projections up finally. And RotoGrinders, they got him at 29.38. But what's standing out about Kobe White, and why I would say that maybe going over his fantasy projection of 30 on PrizePicks, is the fact that the DVA is so damn good. 50.75 puts him over 20 points higher than his projection tonight. And if you look at his recent game logs, 30 has been a number that he has been hitting with great regularity, let's just say. So 31.6 over, 42 over, 31.6 again over. Falls just short of 30 at 28, but still in the neighborhood. So you know that he's playing pretty consistent basketball. And then 33.5 is enough to put him over 30. So 4 overs in his last 5. Pretty good success rate if you ask me. I think there's a good chance that Kobe White can get this done. Now, helping his case in terms of going over, his previous matchup here against this New Orleans Pelicans team back on February 10th, where he puts up 40.9 fantasy points. So big time over on this projection of 30 tonight. Moving on down the line here, Zion Williamson has been a guy that most folks have been clicking the over on recently. He's projected at 44 on PrizePicks, just 42.93 on RotoGrinders, so they've got him as a slight under in this situation. How many times has he went over or under 44? Good question. Going back here, that's an over, and a slight under here. So he's went over 44 in 4 out of his last 5. Pretty good success rate. Chicago's front court stinks. They're not very good at stopping bigger guys like Zion Williamson and some of these other elite centers. His last meeting against the Bulls, though, he puts up just 37.8 fantasy points, which would put him well under 44. So he wouldn't have even come close to sniffing that 44 point over. So interesting situation there for Zion Williamson. Zach LaVine, we got Wendell Carter for Chicago. Wendell Carter, not in a super interesting spot here. He's actually in a negative DVA. So, if he's going up against like Steven Adams and Zion Williamson, that could be a situation where you're taking the under on Wendell Carter if you think he struggles in this one. Moving down the line here, anything else really jumping off? Lonzo Ball, and really, I'll just make a statement here about distributor archetypes in general. They just never really have sexy DVAs. And in other words, every time you see a distributor point guard in one of these videos, the DVAs are like almost always under 20 fantasy points per game allowed by the opposing defense. So yeah, distributor point guards, there's probably just not a lot of them, and the ones that are there, they're the ones that are helping this average stay boosted or propped up. Otherwise, a lot of these guys, even like Alonzo Ball, to me, kind of fits more in as a combo guard. So I don't like this distributor archetype or classification for these point guards a whole lot, and the DVA is just never really favorable for them. But yeah, anyway, I mean, I don't see a ton else that's like super interesting to me in terms of taking overs or unders here. So I'm probably just gonna move on and wrap this one up. But yeah, very good game totals. I think the spread could be in the orange range for me, yellow to orange. Some blowout potential here, possibly, maybe. So let's move on to the next game. We got the Oklahoma City Thunder versus the Dallas Mavericks. And this game is another one that's going to be a little bit on the light side, the low side in terms of game totals. Dallas, the 4-point favorite. But as we mentioned at the top of the show, there's a chance Luka Doncic may not play tonight. And if Luka Doncic doesn't play, well, then that means Jalen Brunson is the next man up for the Dallas Mavericks. So everyone make some noise for Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson's all the way down here. Again, he's another guy that falls into that distributor or pass-first facilitating point guard archetype. So as I mentioned, they just never really get favorable DVAs. But just throw all the numbers out for a minute. When Luka Doncic is out, that means somebody's going to have to step up here. And the lead guard is probably going to be Jalen Brunson in this situation. So keep that in mind. This could be a move where, he defies what you think he's going to do. I mean, this is a pretty sizable over versus this PrizePicks projection of 28. So they got him at 28. He's at almost 35 over on RotoGrinders. So I'd probably click the over on Jalen Brunson just based on that. It's hard to ignore that big of a gap. But anybody else jumping out? Kristaps Porzingis could be an interesting play. He's at 43 though on PrizePicks, which seems pretty dang high for Kristaps. 39.65 on RotoGrinders. They like the under, and I wouldn't call this a plus DVA situation for him in terms of the average that the Oklahoma City Thunder allowed two versatile bigs being higher than where his projection is tonight. So, not super excited about taking the over on Porzingis. If anything, I'd fade, or I'd probably lean toward the under. Anybody else jumping out here? We got to talk SGA because his projection's at 42. This is a guy who was up at 44 just a few nights ago. Now he's down at 42. And he can make a little bit of sense here in terms of taking the over because his DVA is a little bit higher than what his projection is tonight. So maybe a very, very slight margin for a over type performance. Let's just look at his last 5 games and see how he's been doing. So if we go back here, 5 games back, that's a pretty big over at 49. 39.9 puts him short. 56.6 puts him well over, and then back-to-back games where he falls short again. So in his last 5 games, guys, he's got 3 where he's went under and 2 where he's went over his projection of 42. So there you have it for Mr. SGA. Kind of interesting play there, but definitely not a dude that I trust. Should be well rested tonight and put up plenty of minutes here as this spread looks like it's a pretty competitive one. So moving on to the next game here. We got a lot of games. I think there's 10 games on tonight's slate. The LA Lakers, we're going to talk the Golden State Warriors versus Portland Trailblazers first. They're the next team up on the PrizePicks board. So from this game, we've got the likes of Steph Curry, Damian Lillard, Draymond Green, Enes Kanter, Kelly Oubre, and Gary Trent Jr. All right, the totals look fantastic here. Both teams combining for over 232, 233 real-life points, so should be plenty of fantasy upside in this game. Spread is also very good looking, just a 1 to 2 point spread, so the game should stay competitive and be high scoring. 2 fantastic combinations when you're talking overs. This is a good game to potentially take some overs here. All right. First guy that's standing out to me, Damian Lillard, projected at 54. He's at 52.63 on RotoGrinders. The DVA also very good, but not a plus DVA. And why I say that is because the average is lower than his projection in this case. But let's look at his game logs and see what Dame Dolla's been doing. All right. In his last 5, he's went over in just 1 game out of 5. So that's 1 over and 4 unders for Damian Lillard. Not a guy that you have been clicking the over on in much of his recent games here. So hopefully you haven't anyway. If you have, you've been probably losing some money with Damian Lillard. But anyway, in a pretty good spot here in terms of game totals and spread, and the DVA looking quite good. 2 games in 3 nights for him, 1.32 fantasy points per minute, and his usage ratings well over 33. So he's a monster. I mean, there's nothing really more for me to say there. Steph Curry, he's at 51 on PrizePicks, 48.99. We call it 49 over on RotoGrinders. He's a combo guard, and this Portland team is allowing 47.99 fantasy points per game to combo guards such as Curry. So not a plus DVA situation in terms of his PrizePicks projection versus what they're allowing on average, but still a pretty good matchup here for him. Now in his last 5, he's went over 51 in just 2 games. So 2 games he's went over, 3 games in a row he's went under. So he's been playing pretty good, but not great basketball lately, failing to hit that 50 mark or more in a lot of his more recent games. So yeah, I mean, again, this is a guy that you're just not comfortable ever really taking the under on. So I would be careful with taking the under on Steph Curry here. This could be just a situation to avoid, quite honestly. Who else? Anybody else really standing out? Draymond, he should be in a pretty good position. He's projected at 35. His projection over on RotoGrinders, 34.76. So they're both in that ballpark of 34 to 35 points, but the DVA is right in the same neighborhood too, around 33 to 34 points. So pretty accurate there. I think, if he gets 34, 35, well, who's going to be surprised? Probably not me, but that might be a situation to avoid. Not really seeing much of an edge there for us. Enes Kanter, he is in a situation where he is an under, according to RotoGrinders. I'm sorry. Take that back. He's a slight over, according to RotoGrinders. The DVA, however, puts him in a negative situation. So don't be surprised if Enes Kanter ends up going under. And I don't think he's been playing quite that great of basketball lately. Let's just look at his last 5, because now I'm interested. Now you got me curious. So in 30, at the projection of 34 here in his last 5 games, he's went over once, twice, 3 times. So he's went over in 3, under in 2. So not a bad success rate in terms of hitting the over. Nothing else really super interesting that is standing out, catching my eye. Gary Trent, shooting wing, in a very negative DVA situation, projected at 26 tonight. So taking the under on him might be a look. But yeah, I think in general, that's going to sum it up for me. Very high game totals, very competitive spread. So I do think taking the over on some of the higher usage and higher fantasy point per minute guys makes some sense. And last but not least, we finally get the Lakers and the Sacramento Kings, and the big news that hit us this morning: LeBron James, the King, he's not going to be playing tonight. Oh my God. Oh my God. Say it ain't so. Say it ain't so. Yeah, unfortunately, no LeBron James tonight. So that's why you see guys like Dennis Schroeder at 37, Montrezl Harrell at 33. Shoot, even Markieff Morris at 26 and Kyle Kuzma at 29. These guys typically can't break 30 in terms of fantasy projections. But tonight, no LeBron James. Somebody's going to have to step up for this Lakers squad. All right. Now, Dennis Schroeder makes some sense here. Not only because LeBron won't be in the lineup, but the fact that this DVA is just bonkers for him. The Sacramento Kings allow over 54 fantasy points per game to combo guards like Schroeder. So, yeah, definite plus matchup here. Definite upside situation for Dennis Schroeder. Don't mind that one at all. De'Aaron Fox, he's projected at 43. They like the under on De'Aaron Fox, but the DVA suggests that there is a chance that maybe this is more of an upside game for De'Aaron Fox. So he's kind of an interesting play. We got Kyle Kuzma projected at 29. He's at 28 over on RotoGrinders. He's another guy in a plus DVA situation who has a chance with more playing time, more opportunities, and a favorable DVA to go over his projection of 29. So that could make some sense. Nothing else looking super, super interesting, to be honest with you guys. Buddy Hield at 30. He is questionable to play. They got him at 28.55 over on RotoGrinders. Shooting wings against the Lakers have not done well this season. Lakers ranking almost like the best team in the league in terms of limiting shooting wings to any big fantasy point per game mark. So, yeah, not super interested in targeting Buddy Hield and going over. He might be a good play for an under based on DVA here. But yeah, I think that's going to do it, guys. I think that pretty much sums up most of these games. That last game, not crazy high totals, but competitive spread with LeBron out. The Kings should be able to make it a good competitive game. But you guys let me know what you think. Who are you liking out of today's PrizePicks slate? Big board here. I mean, lots of players to choose from. Lots of injury news still to come. So keep an eye out. That's going to be my word of wisdom for today. Keep an eye on injury news and have that finger ready to click, because you just never know what type of deal you can lock into your lineup that can win you some big money tonight. But anyway, that's going to do it for today's video. I appreciate you guys being patient. Yeah, I wish this video could have gotten out sooner. But again, stuff happens. But better late than never. Hopefully this video brings you some value, though. Give it a quick watch. Till next time, guys, win some money tonight. This is CJ for Out of Bounds. Peace out.